to the first podcast presented by Smart Club. आज हामीसँग दुईजना महान व्यक्तिहरू हुनुहुन्छ र दुवैजना चाहिँ स्मार्ट क्लबको खत्रै स्पिकर हुनुहुन्छन् र आज चाहिँ अब दुवैजना पब्लिक स्पिकिङ ब्याकग्राउन्डबाट आएको हुने कारणले चाहिँ आज हामी पर्टिकुलरली पब्लिक स्पिकिङको बारेमा अलिक बढी चर्चा गर्छौँ र त्यो पब्लिक स्पिकिङभित्र पनि रेटोरिक्स भन्ने चाहिँ के हो त आजको हाम्रो मेन विषय पब्लिक स्पिकिङ र रेटोरिक्समा हुनेछ र त्यसै गरी आज हाम्रो दुईटा स्पिकर हुनुहुन्छ मिस्टर प्रणव काफ्ले र मिस्टर बिपिन रिमाल तर रेटोरिक्सभित्र छिर्नभन्दा अगाडि पनि रेटोरिक्स हुन त के हो रेटोरिक्सलाई त छुट्टै तरिकाहरूले अब छुट्टै तरिकामा थुप्रै मान्छेहरूले थुप्रै तरिकामा डिफाइन गर्छन् होइन त्यसैले अब हामी आफ्नै स्पिकरहरूबाट आज सुनौँ कि तिनीहरूको अनुसार रेटोरिक भने के हो प्रणव दाइ तपाईँलाई के लाग्छ रेटोरिक भने के हो
Thank you for having me here. Rhetoric भन्ने बित्तिकै एकदमै बटम लाइनमा सिम्प्लिस्टिक डेफिनेसन दिँदाखेरि चाहिँ it is a form of communication where you communicate in a way that you persuade other people, where you inspire other people, where you inform other people in a way that they are convinced that that is the truth or that is the way something should be. So basically, whenever someone speaks in public, for example, politicians or motivational speakers, they utilize different techniques of rhetoric in order to persuade you, motivate you, or inspire you into doing something. So that's rhetoric.
So according to you, rhetoric is all about pursuing someone into following your idea, right?
Yes.
Nice. So what do you think about rhetoric?
Okay. To start with, I want to clear something up. It's like you said, public speaking ko bhitra jada rhetoric, but that's not the case. When we talk about rhetoric ko bhitra cha public speaking ho. Rhetoric is any act, right, that is used for persuasion. It can be in writing, it can be not just verbal, non-verbal as well. So when we talk about rhetoric, it is simply the art of persuasion. You're trying to convince other people in order to do something that you desire. And now whether you're successful or not, that does not matter. But when you indulge in it, that's rhetoric. May it be public speaking, may it be writing, any method.
So, from like both of you agree on the fact that rhetoric means to persuade someone, right?
Yes.
But then again, this thing called rhetoric, it can be confusing to a lot of individuals because when you ask someone, then they are confused about it. Even I am confused because if someone asks me what is rhetoric, then I don't have a particular answer, right? Like I cannot say it's just persuasive, like it's just persuading something. So like, can you define that? What do you mean by the actually persuading? Like, is it by speaking or by writing or just like forcing a group to believe in your idea?
For forcing is the opposite of what rhetoric tries to achieve. We don't want to force anyone. Let me put it in a different way. Let me rephrase it. Rhetoric is a way of using language in order to communicate what you believe to other people so that they believe the same thing. For example, if I tell you that, Sanbaj, I really wish that you would not go to Australia because youths like you must stay in Nepal. We are in a dire lack of incredible youth with great potential. So I want you to stay here, work together, and help us develop our country. So if this is how I speak to you, then I am using rhetoric. I am trying to appeal to your emotion that you are incredible, you have potential, and our country requires people like you. Therefore, there is a need that I'm showing you. So the way I'm speaking to you right now is my way of using rhetoric in order to persuade you, in order to convince you that, okay, maybe not Australia, maybe Nepal itself, right? So that's rhetoric.
Okay. Well, thank you for persuading me. I know I'm incredible, but still, I guess I will be going to Australia. But then again, I get that it is persuading. But so you mean that we persuade someone using rhetoric? It means that we even subconsciously we are using rhetoric in our general lives, right? So, Bipin, can you just clarify me that how, as an individual, we tend to use this rhetoric, but even though not like we do not know that we are actually using rhetoric while we are using it.
Yeah. Yes. So your question is, how do we as individuals use rhetoric in our daily lives, right? I think this is a very simple question. Whenever you ask your parents for money, you're not just like, you actually try to employ some method in order to persuade them, right? you try to give them reasons saying like, "Mommy, आज पैसा दिन्छु न यो काम छ, मम्मी पैसा दिन्छु न बुक किन्नु छ, मम्मी पैसा दिन्न यो ठाउँ जानु छ," right? That is simply using rhetoric, and I think this is particularly in the case of other people. You don't say it in the same bland manner that I do. You have certain intonations, you have certain change in language. You're like, "Mommy, this you know." You're either begging or you're trying to appeal to any aspect of them. That is simply the use of rhetoric. Rhetoric, I think it's an extension from what Pranav said, right? Pranav said it's communicating, but rhetoric itself can be said it's an act itself. You are acting, right, in a manner that convinces people. Because what you did to Sanbaj, it was acting, right? It was a exchange of banter between friends, right? Saying, "No, don't go to Australia." And he chose this setting, which was the most, appropriate. So we can see it as an act itself. So that's what I believe. It's like whenever you act to persuade, it's rhetoric.
So basically, when you say rhetorics, we tend to use certain logic or certain act to persuade just to persuade other people to believe in our ideas. So does this thing called rhetoric defines us, or does it differentiate us from animals? Like, what is if I say what is the one thing that segregates human beings from other animals? So is the answer rhetoric? What do you think about that?
Not necessarily. It's a very vague kind of question over there, because of course even animals try to attract their mates by doing all kinds of dances. So we may be able to put that under rhetoric, but rhetoric is very complex. It uses a lot of different aspects like language, body language, gestures, voice modulation, all these kind of stuff, and animals don't necessarily do that. But still, if you would like to say maybe even animals do that, they do, because without communication, right, nothing works in this universe. Everything is communication. Even gravity, it's a way of communicating, right? For example, sun is communicating with earth so that earth does not run away. It is gravity, but it's still rhetoric. So if you think about that in a very bigger in a bigger picture, then maybe yes, rhetoric is all over the world. But then if we want to segregate that into something narrower, then I think human beings are better at rhetoric than other living things or even non-living things in the world.
I really love the analogy of sun and earth. It was very entertaining. So how does this thing rhetoric came into the existence, or it became so deeply rooted in us that we tend to use it even though we don't know that we are using it? So what is the history behind rhetorics? How does it came into existence, how it flourished, and how it became so deeply rooted in all of our culture that we tend to use it in every bits in our life?
Thank you for the question. When we talk about rhetoric, right, I believe the first pioneers of rhetoric would be Aristotle or Plato when they talked about different ideas, because those were discussed. And it initially started in Greece, or Greece at that time, because it had a democracy, right? People actually wanted to listen to what other people had to say. So when you had a case, right, you needed to be able to convince the audience of your case. And in order to convince the audience, you need to understand is human beings, we still have a primitive brain. We are slowly trying to develop our brain into a logical one, but we are still emotional beings. So when it comes to rhetoric, right, it encompasses everything: logic, emotion, and personality itself. So it developed in this manner in order to persuade other people, right? Firstly, it was to get justice in front of a court, right? How will you be able to convince the audience? And therefore, I think in daily practice, we always communicate, right? We always want something and we need to communicate that, and slowly it developed to what it is today.
I guess you all are enjoying this intellectual discussion on rhetorics, but how can you develop your rhetorics in a sense that if I want to communicate with someone, how do I communicate better? If I want to spread my idea, then how do I spread it better? So what are the tips or the things that you can say that I can use as an individual, due to which I would have a higher degree of rhetorics, I guess?
I think there is a deeper answer to that. Generally, if someone asks me that question, what I would say is, keep practicing, learn different kinds of techniques, have more projection of your voice, have different intonations, have a greater hold in your language. But if we want to delve deeper into this idea, then what I think is rhetoric. I think rhetoric revolves around the idea that everything is a persuasion, right? For example, Rajit, he said that we need to start this podcast ASAP, right? And then for that I said, yes, we need to, because I have to be somewhere at 5. For that reason, he hurried it. We stopped playing, we stopped eating, and we started our podcast. So that is also a form of rhetoric. But what I'm using there is, I was not being all dramatic. Oh my God, Rajit, if I don't go there at 5, the world is gonna fall apart, and then I'm not going to be able to do. No, I did not use that though, right? So rhetoric is not, all these voice modulations and body language per se. It is a way of persuasion. What I used him was, I have some important thing to do, and you as a friend and a colleague, you understand that what is important for me is important for you as well, right? So I'm using that underlying understanding, underlying agreement that we respect each other's time. Therefore, let's follow with that. Let's respect my time and work faster. So that is something that I used in order to persuade him. So rhetoric can be subtle as well. It does not always have to be bland and out there. It does not have to be that way.
So basically, like, rhetoric is a two-dimensional thing, right? If I want to persuade someone, then I use some way so that my message get across. Yes. But again, if some other individuals want to persuade me, then even he will use rhetoric, right? Yeah. So basically, rhetoric is linked to the rationality. Yeah. So the question is, what if my rationality is being questioned or it is being altered? For example, in my home, right, I decide to watch porn for half an hour. And then if I was much more rational being, then I would have decided to watch something better, something like productive, right? But still, I tend to watch this porn for half an hour. So why do I watch this? Because there are these subliminal messages that comes across, right? Which is also related to rhetorics. So how do I be safe from this negative rhetorics, or how do I keep myself away from such rhetorics which have repercussions that alters my rationality?
Okay. That is a very important question. Now, what we're talking about here is, because there are so many rhetorics flying all around us, right? There are so many things trying to persuade us. Ads try to persuade us, right? Every day, and there are corporations which are actually dedicated to make sure that we change our mind and do something we don't want to do. Why are we using Facebook? Because the rhetoric of Facebook is use that so you connect with people, and Instagram and others are same, right? So to an individual level, why rhetoric is important is the answer itself, because it prevents bad rhetoric, right? Because what do we see here? When you talk about watching pornography, you're talking about being persuaded by other messages, right? But if you were someone who is adept at rhetoric itself, then you would be able to properly educate yourself and properly convince yourself that you should not be watching pornography and masturbating, right? Because if we look at the harmful effects of it, we do understand it. The development of rhetoric is, in a sense, the development of a person itself. You develop ways to think, you develop ways to convince other people. And in doing so, you also develop ways to convince yourself. Because one of the key aspects of developing rhetoric is developing content. So let's take an example of watching pornography itself. If you're someone who is able to articulate himself why he should watch pornography, the simple reason is you'll ejaculate and you won't be stressed. But if you're developed in rhetoric, then you understand you need more content. So what is the other explanation as to why you should not watch pornography and masturbate? Well, firstly, you are gonna screw up your dopamine system, right? You will be getting dopamine for something you did not deserve. Secondly, you may dehydrate because you may watch pornography too much. Thirdly, you'll get wrong information about sex itself, right? So when you indulge in rhetoric, what you do is you find ways in order to persuade. And persuading others only starts when you are able to persuade yourself. So I think that is one of the ways how you can avoid bad rhetoric.
Yeah, I'd like to add on to that. Yeah. So if I want to summarize what Bipin says, right? The reason why you're watching pornography is because your rhetoric is weaker than the rhetoric of pornography. Let me elaborate on that. So, if you had a strong rhetoric that if I watch porn, then I will not have these benefits, like Bipin said, right? You may not be, you may not have a proper dopamine system and all that kind of things. And then if you also think about, if I don't watch porn and masturbate, then I have to go outside, talk to a lady, and then engage in a sexual activity, which would in turn satisfy your needs. And that is a better way to live. That if that rhetoric was stronger than pornography telling you that, you know what, you don't have to go outside and meet girls or do anything. You can just look at amazing, hot porn stars and have fun at your own home with your right hand or left or whatever you prefer. right? So because your rhetoric that I must go outside and meet a girl is weaker than the rhetoric that it is easier, man. Come on, just go pornhub.com, have fun. So because of that reason, you're not being able to persuade yourself, and that's why you're succumbing into the bad habit.
I guess I will definitely stop watching porn. So when we talk about rhetorics, then I personally believe that the kind of rhetoric that is being flourished in Nepali society or Nepali community is not that strong, because people are generally easily persuaded by some political parties or some ideas, right? So, like, can you just elaborate on the condition that Nepal is going through, like how this rhetoric plays in Nepali societies and how it actually affects the individual, leading to the majority of people, and that majority of people, when they do certain when they take certain action, then it overall has the consequences for the entire country.
Okay. Thank you. Right. This is something that really intrigues me. The idea that rhetoric is not strong in Nepal itself. It is, I think, evident in the content that we consume. Most of us don't like troll Nepal or meme Nepal, right? Because we believe they give out horrible content. But similarly, we like dank memes and cyanide and other international memes. So what is the difference here, right? It's like even on YouTube, we don't necessarily find Nepalese content to be very popular or even liked by many. But few which have good content get a lot of views, a lot of likes, and a lot of appreciation. What we see in Nepal itself is there is a lack of rhetoric. I think it starts with our schooling system as well, where we just copy off answers, right? So we don't have the proper development of content in ourselves. And another thing is we also don't properly communicate. We just listen to what our parents say and that's it. Or we have parents who just spoil the kids and they don't communicate in a proper manner as well. See, there are a lot of problems which inhibit the development of rhetoric in Nepal. And I think that's one of the reasons we don't have proper content on, let's say, Instagram, Facebook, or YouTube, right? That's why we don't have proper politicians, because there isn't the proper development of rhetoric in Nepal itself. And I think this is one of the challenges that we should try to, tackle on. And one of the ways is this.
So as Bipin stated, one of the problem, right? Like people generally don't have much rhetorics about political parties and all. Like if for me as an individual, if I have to vote some party, then I do it in three bases. One is that since my parents is voting for a particular party, then I am obliged to vote that party. Second is that just because I've heard about a party and not another, I will vote for it. And third is that I just have to vote, so I don't give a damn which party I'm voting. I just go there and vote, right? And I believe all these three methods are very much wrong and very much detrimental. So what can be the solution for the youths in Nepal to actually develop their rhetoric so that they will know that what are the consequences of their action?
It's about the habit, like he says. Whenever someone sees something in Facebook, it automatically becomes the truth. No one is checking the fact whether it is true or not, or whether it is just a hoax. No one is caring. And then on top of that, Nepali people have this tendency to jump into the bandwagon, if you know what that means. Like, if something is trending, then you know what, that's the truth, that's the way to go, that's the purpose of the universe, that's the way we go. For example, like Rabi Lamichhane, right? The very recent news of the journalist who did suicide, and he blamed Rabi Lamichhane for his death. And everyone is freaking out because Rabi Lamichhane is arrested, right? But we need to understand that arresting someone is just a process of understanding what's going on. It does not mean that he is being what is the word, implicit.
He was taken into custody.
He was taken into custody,
Not arrested.
yeah. It does not mean that he is guilty of the crime that he's been accused of, right? So arresting is just a process, but all of us are like, no, you know what? Oh my God, Nepali police corrupted people, corrupted politician. He took the one person who was caring about the justice of Nepal. So everyone is freaking out without any understanding of any knowledge whatsoever. A lot of these people don't even watch the YouTube video, the suicide video that the person made before killing himself. And then another thing is, for example, all these trending TikTok videos, we just want to do it because everyone else is doing. And that is the reason why youth cannot even vote properly, because there was this politician called, I think, Ranju Darshana, right? From Vivekshil Party. Yeah. So she was a lady. She was young, 21 years old, and she had this way of shouting and have that energy that a lot of politicians didn't have. So everyone's like, oh my God, this is the new thing. How is that a proper reason to vote someone? Because it's a new thing. How is new thing good? We don't have to analyze that. We just, you know what, Ranju Darshanai, here we go. And she got a vote almost like that of Congress or something. I don't know the statistics, but she won with a lot of. She did not win, but she got a lot of votes. She was second. Yeah. So during the general election, I think. Yeah. So the reason behind this is we don't, like he said, we don't have the tendency to evaluate, to learn, to be informed and make an informed decision. We don't want to do that. We just want to jump into the bandwagon, follow everyone else, because we don't have a strong rhetoric ourselves. And in order to do that, first thing we need to do is read, lift, and meditate. 3 things. Right? Why is that? Because if we lift, then we have our physical body in a proper structure, right? We're healthier. And then if we meditate, our mind is healthier. And then when we read, we become smarter so that we can make informed decisions. Like Tyrion Lannister said, like a sword needs a whetstone to be sharp, I need book to keep my brain sharper. So that's why people must read, and that's the only way to make informed decision and to have a proper rhetoric.
I think I want to add on that, right? So there is this idea that the youths are not being informed, and this is something to do with the conscious choice, right? Because these people are someone whose rhetoric are not developed. That is, they do not have the ability to understand rhetoric properly. So what do is they jump in the first bandwagon themselves. So this is also an important aspect where we say that rhetoric needs to be developed in a human being. Because once you develop rhetoric, then you don't look at things from one perspective. You don't necessarily jump into conclusions. You try to develop more. That is to say, why is this person saying this? And is what this person saying valid? Because when we hear some person speak, if it connects to us internally, we don't tend to carefully analyze that. And this is something that could change if we develop rhetoric itself.
So there is this thing that I want to ask people. Pranav in his speech, he told that people rhetoric are threatened when majority of people are following a particular rhetoric, and they can strengthen their rhetoric by physically, being strong physically and mentally. But that is the thing that is very much hard to do, because when majority of people follow a particular rhetoric, then it is very hard to find diversity in that particular society. It is very hard to come up with a rhetoric that is different from that majority's one, right? For example, in India, when we see that the present party is anti-Muslim, they are spreading an anti-Muslim rhetoric, because we see that Muslim leaders' name are being eradicated from textbooks. We see that the streets' name are being changed, right? And even in the election which was held in US, whenever Donald Trump used a racist word, his poll went just skyrocketed, right? So the thing is that when such rhetoric with such strength exists, then it is very much difficult for me as an individual to come up with a rhetoric that is just totally opposite from that rhetoric, and it threatens me. So I, being as a minority in terms of rhetoric, so how should I actually improve it? Because just by saying I should like mentally strengthen it or for physically strengthen it, it is a like solution, but then again it is a vague solution. So what are the solutions that you want to give?
This is a really burning issue, right? So what we have is the development of rhetoric is one way in the development of self, right? Because we are all social beings. We do tend to conform to each other, right? We want to be agreeable. We want to be a part of the society, and that means we don't necessarily want to stand out as someone who is not with the crowd. So in such scenarios, what we do see is we do not see that an individual voice makes a difference, right? For example, being a minority, it's really hard. But in itself, this is also one of the reasons why you need to develop rhetoric. Because firstly, it makes you a strong individual, right? Because when you are sure about yourself, when you're able to convince yourself of the things that you believe in, then only then you can move forward. Secondly, the development of rhetoric is the thing that is used to make other people believe in you. Because let's take a example of King Martin Luther, right? Martin Luther Jr., right? King Martin Luther Jr. He was someone who was a minority. He was a black person, but he was able to convince a lot of people. It's like, I think over 1 million people, 250,000 people showed up to listen to his speech. And he said, I have a dream, right? And if you carefully analyze the past, what you see is people with rhetoric have been able to change the status quo, even if they were in the minority, right? Because what we see is, even in the US, black people, they do commit most of the crimes, but Martin Luther King Jr. was able to ameliorate the situation a little bit. He was able to talk against racism. And how was he able to do this? With the help of rhetoric, right? Even when it comes to India, there are a lot of vocal people who are speaking against it. That's why it's not a total dictatorship. It's not the eradication of a race, right? Because there are strong people who are being vocal about it. And this is one of the ways. It's like the development of rhetoric firstly makes you stand out in a crowd of sheep or in a crowd itself. And secondly, it helps to propagate your message. So rhetoric is first self-development, and then you are able to spread it outwards. In the case of India and Kashmir, I think that's also one of the things, right? Because what we see is it's not proper rhetoric that's being battled. It's Hindu versus Islam. And I believe there should be a voice that speaks for humanity. That rhetoric would triumph these two battles.
So as in the introduction, I told you that this podcast is going to be about public speaking and rhetorics. And then you said that public speaking comes under rhetoric. So now, given that you are such a great speaker, now I want you to tell us that how, like, talking specifically about public speaking, how can you actually say, like, use public speaking to spread rhetoric, or how can you just develop public speaking to an extent where your rhetoric is easily spreaded to the entire people?
Public speaking is one of the areas under rhetoric that has been widely discussed, researched, and great theories have come out of it. So it's very easy for me to answer, but then also because it is a vast subject, I cannot possibly contract it into a single minute or so. But still, I'll try. First thing is we can divide public speaking into two parts, which we keep doing in Smart Club. That would be the manner part and the matter part. Right? Matter part is really important because content is the king. Whatever we are trying to persuade other people with, first of all, we must be thorough with that. We must understand it through and through, and then only we can go outside and talk to them. So first thing is preparation of your content. Right? So when you know what is your rhetoric, when you know what you're trying to tell other people, when you know what you're trying to persuade other people with, and then comes the manner part, where you muse about how you want to use that content in order to persuade someone. And there comes all kinds of techniques. For example, voice modulation. People don't like monotonous, boring, brooding voice. They want, different variations in your voice. They want people to be excited, and then sometimes they want to be very silent, serious, and humble, all that kind of things. So you want to use that in order to persuade people. Then you can also use different words and intonations. You can use rhymes, you can use quotations, you can use all these kinds of stuff in order to compel people to follow or confirm to what you're trying to say, right? And then comes the body language part, which is also very important, because communications are not always vocal. It's also done by utilizing different parts of your body. You can use your hand gestures. For example, the very common one is if you show your palm, people are more receptive to you because they think that you have nothing to hide. However, on the contrary, if you're doing like this or you're fiddling with your arms, you're not showing your palm, then people think you're nervous, you have something to hide, you have ulterior motive behind what you're saying. So all of these matter. So for you to use rhetoric in a way that you can persuade other people, you can compel other people to subscribe to your belief, then what you must do is be humble, open, natural, and have a robust content that you can use with your manner part as well.
Well, that was a very critical feedback, and I guess it will be very much helpful for our viewers. So in this discussion, we discussed a lot of things. We discussed that what actually is rhetoric, and what was the history of rhetoric, and what was the impact of rhetoric in the Nepali society or in the society in general. And we also came to a conclusion that I should stop watching porn. So when we come to this end, still I want these two amazing people to give a single message to our viewers. So from this overall discussion, what is that one particular thing that you want to give to our viewers so that they can actually incorporate it in their daily life and can work on it? Yeah, Bipin.
I think I'm gonna give two messages, right? The first one is obviously come to Smart Club, right? The second one being, I think one of the most important things that I want to say to people is the development of content. That is to say, most of the time what we normally care about is how things are presented, right? But the development of content is something I believe is to be developed in Nepal. Most of us don't engage in the development of content. That is because most of us don't develop in our languages itself. We barely speak English, and we don't even speak Nepali at all. Even when we do, we don't speak it properly. So I think that is one thing people should really focus on, the development of language and content, finally.
I have a very succinct one-worded message for everyone, and that message would be think. Think before you speak, think before you do anything, and thinking is not just a process that goes inside your head, because thinking requires input as well as output. To think, you have to read, you have to collect information, you have to bring in all kinds of ideas and knowledge so that you can muse on it, you can think on it, you can ponder on it, and then after you think, you come to a conclusion, and then you can use rhetoric in order to propagate that, in order to tell other people about what you have thought. So think, read, be informed, and then speak, persuade, make a better society. Thank you very much.
What about Sanbaj in Australia?
Well, I tried.
So do you want to comment something on me going to Australia?
I think I already did. I'm not very happy about it. but best of luck nonetheless.
Thank you, brother.
Reverse psychology.
Let me think before I speak. So with this, we have come to the end of our podcast, and let me tell you that whenever I think about amazing people in my life, then the two first name that pops in my head is obviously Pranav brother and Bipin Rimal. So these two people are not just good speaker, they are good human being as well. So you will get to know them if you meet them personally. And I guess that this intellectual discussion was very much fruitful for me and for you all. And we believe that we will be coming up with more podcasts to develop your rhetorics, to develop your rationality, and to make you a better version of yourself. In the process, we also will be growing. So thank you for this. It was the end of first podcast from Smart Club. So before ending, I would just like to tell something about Smart Club. Smart Club is something that has been deeply related to me, to these people. Smart Club is a place where you grow So if you really want to know about Smart Club, just visit the Facebook page and get in contact with people who goes to Smart Club. For example, the CCTs that do all kind of activities in Smart Club, from organizing the sessions, from facilitating you with other people by encouraging you to take roles to make you into a better speaker, a better human being, or someone who has a family back in Smart Club. So let's come in Smart Club, let's be in that particular family, and let's live a great life. I hope that you all enjoyed the podcast, because I really did, and we believe that we will be enjoying many more podcasts in days to come. Thank you.